Welcome to Remake, Remodel, a music podcast that discusses current and older music while deep diving into the themes and trends with these spaces. I'm David, aka Stranded, run Double Phantom Records, and I'm joined by my co-host, Drew, of High Marks and Warning Light. We are in a new year, and we're going to be looking over our albums and favorite pieces of music and, I guess, themes and trends within that over 2023. But Drew, I feel like we need to get something out of the way regarding some untimely news that has occurred in the last few days, just to pay respects.
I have to agree, David. It came a little out of the blue on a lot of levels for a lot of people, I'm sure. But we do have to say rest in peace to both Silent Servant and the Soft Moon. I, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in. And as a fan, not only of both projects, but of them as people and having mutual friends, it's a very tough thing to take in. But um, I took some time this week and went back and listened to some of my favorite songs by both of them, and it really helped me kind of navigate through being very upset about the whole thing. And I know everyone kind of has their own way to look at it, but I mean, you know, you just can't help but be sad about it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, both of these artists were very influential and formidable, I guess, in our taste. And if you're a fan of post-punk, industrial techno, I mean, there's no doubt that you would probably be familiar or cross paths, seen them live, experienced their DJ sets. Um, these were two big characters and artists within the scene, and just very untimely passing, and also on additional tragedies. Simone Juan Mendez's wife, aka Silent Servant's wife, she also passed. So just respect and thinking of all the people affected by this, obviously. But it's just we felt that we had to give notice and appreciation to them for what they
Absolutely.
put out.
As people that have followed their music for some time, it just felt like something that was worth being said. But that being also said, uh, David, what new music are we kicking into for the coming year? Because we always have to have something new at the top of the show. We got to have something brand new to talk about.
Yeah, the first song that we're going to talk about is Fortet's Loved. Which is off of his label. Is that Text Recordings? Is that how you call that,
I believe
Drew?
it's
Is that what?
Text Records.
Records, okay. But either way, he has said that this is the first single off of his upcoming album. I guess following a very down tempo. Um, I mean, you got his break beats on this. I honestly enjoyed it. I love everything he does, but this one, it's not as broken beat sounding as some of his other stuff. Is a little more fluid, I guess, the best way to describe it. But with when it comes to Fortet, I'm always going to be on the lookout and interested to what's to come.
Oh, for sure. I'm super stoked on this one, David. This will be, I'm thinking, probably one of my more intriguing electronic leaning records for the year. But, you know, the last couple have always had at least one song that I really liked on it. I feel like he's the king of that, where even if I don't love the whole record, I really, really like one of the songs. I just got to say, this single, though, really, really jumped in my ear really, really hard when I heard it. For sure, for sure.
What's your first one, I should say?
Well, I wanted to start out this year by mentioning the first new single, although there has been another single off this record, but the first new single off the upcoming record by The Smile, Friend of a Friend.
Buried from the waist down. Stop looking over our shoulder.
On XL Recordings. I gotta say, unlike the sprawl of the other single, the epicness, this one has the epic sound quality, but not the epic length. It's a little more like a classic runtime of a song, but just completely in their vein, I will say. It's got that kind of spooky strings, ethereal quality to it. Very excited about this record, David. Very excited about it.
Yeah, honestly, I will say I haven't heard it yet, but I'm kind of putting it off. I think I might just wait for the whole album to drop and then get into it. And that's kind of what I did with the first one.
Uh huh.
I heard snippets of the first single, but I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna kind of let this all come at once and see how I react to it.
Right.
And I mean, again, the figures involved with it. There's no reason for it to not be good.
Oh,
So,
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here's the thing. I like the first one. I really do. But Bending Hectic to me was such an amazing single that I've gotten more excited about this new one than I was about the first one. So, just interested to see what they do with their concepts on this one. I know it's going to be in some ways not a complete departure from the first one, but I at the same time just loved how weird sounding Bending Hectic was. I really did. What's next coming out of your end, David? I think it's something a little bit different for us.
definitely, this is a new artist on the Italian label Quinty Records. They're out of Florence, I believe. And this band is Dead Bandit, and the song is Peel Me an Orange. Now, Bandit is from Chicago, and this is a group that you could definitely see is influenced by a lot of cranky records type music, like La Bradford, I would say. Drew, you kind of positioned it as like a laptop duo meets post rock, I guess, and yeah, it feels very much in all that vein, moody, droney type stuff that you would deal off of that. But I'm really looking forward to hearing the whole thing. This one just came across my way pretty recently here, so kind of left field, was not aware of them, but I'm interested in this.
This feels like a reasonable juncture to say this, but I feel like several songs on this list, it's the classic thing where it almost is unfair to listen to a single out of a record. Some records just need to just be listened to. And sometimes with a post rock type thing, having a single of that, you're like, okay, let's pull a single off this album where the whole thing kind of plays like one long song, or like it's more like a painting. I feel like a lot of post rock music has this like painterly quality to it. And so how do you pull one little aspect out of a painting, you know what I mean? And have that be the calling card of the painting.
Uh huh, definitely.
Um,
And that's kind of like how I feel with your next one, a band that we have talked about before, but they are going to give us a new record this year too, like they had last year. And they
an
also, I feel like their albums kind of speak in one giant listening
Oh,
for
for
for me at
sure.
least.
Absolutely. My next pick is going to be Big Brave's I Felt a Funeral on Thrill Jockey Records. This project is another project that's actually very indebted to the cranky sound on a lot of levels. They just take it in a more drone rock kind of direction, obviously. Um, I have been a huge fan of this project since probably their third album. I think that's kind of when I was my entryway into them. But that being said, the stuff they've been doing these last couple years, it's just been, if you're a fan of it, you love it kind of thing. Like everything they
Hmm.
do really is kind of that great continuum of what kind of interesting, heavy drone rock, drone metal kind of approach can we take to this type of sound, and what can we do? Like, because some of their records tend to go more shoegaze, some of their records tend to go more almost noise rock itself. But that being said, the new single has a real haunting quality to it. It's very slow, and there's a lot of really slow moving feedback kind of sounds happening in it. I'm very excited to see what this record is going to sound like in its entirety. But you're very right. It's a little unfair to judge some bands by their singles, and I feel like Big Brave kind of does fall into that a little bit, where you say, well, I don't know, is it really fair to, you know, to put that on them? But that being said, for a band as wildly consistent as they are, it is very exciting to hear a new song by them. So very, very stoked on this record for sure.
And then you're going to take the next one from the more
I am.
veteran presence.
I'm gonna do a little bit of a round robin here, and talk about Ride's new single, "Peace Sign."
It's alright, your instincts are always right. Give me a peace sign. Throw your hands in the air. Give me a peace sign. Let me know you're there. Give me a peace sign. Throw your hands in the air.
Coming to us from Wichita and Pius. Ride, of course, I do not need to introduce them necessarily. If you're probably listening to this podcast, you almost assuredly have heard of Ride. Unlike Slowdive's comeback, I'm reading this Ride in a very different sort of a way, but will say it very much sounds like Ride. If you're a Ride fan, you're going to get some hard ride out of this. You know what I mean? Like, because it jangles hard, David. It jangles hard at the beginning of the song. Now, my snide comment that I'm going to make about this track, David, because I've been thinking a lot about this since I first heard it, is I really imagine Ride were sitting around when they were putting together the new set of songs, and one of them said, hey, we really need a song that we can play when we play like Glastonbury or like a big festival show. And so I'm sure Mark Gardner was like, oh, yeah, let me think about it for a minute. And that's exactly what Peace Sign is. I'm telling you right now, the chorus of it, Give Me a Peace Sign, is literally like what they're going to be soliciting live, is like people throwing them the peace sign live kind of thing. So well played, gentlemen. Well played. Bands used to do that. They used to write songs with like intentional live purposes in mind.
Right.
And I think this song really speaks to that concept, a more classic era type concept. But they've been around, so they remember those things a little bit more so. Speaking of a band that's been around a few years, maybe not as many years as Ride, what track do you have next on your big 2024 newbies?
So we got Plastic Pyramid by Omni, which features Izzy Glaudini of Automatic.
Box, paradise, culture, synthesized.
Are you deflated, baby?
Not gonna lie, I feel pretty small.
This world is far beneath me.
The Sphinx, the Nile, I ordered it all. When you know,
Sub Pop is putting out Omni's next coming album, which is due in February. But this is Omni at probably their most confident and playful, I would say. Extremely catchy. And this new album by them is... everything seems kind of out in front in the mix. They're kind of like... I feel like they're very comfortable in their skin, and the guitars are shining right through from Frankie, and it's a very punchy record. It comes right through the speakers, and I will say I've gotten a head listen on all of it, and it's quite good, and I'm very excited for everyone to hear the full thing. But I think that this single is a perfect encapsulation of what you can expect coming forward from this, and I think it was a nice duo between Philip and Izzy here, and just really excited for them on this one.
Yeah, I gotta say, when I heard the single, my mind immediately went to, it has like a new wave upness, like an up-tempo-ness, and not new wave in the sense of trying to mimic that sound, but more what I mean is when the new wave records all hit, they were really bright and cheery sounding records and kind of tempo in a sense, and I kind of got this really Cars almost kind of vibe from them on this
Well, it's
one.
like Cars and when I say it really punches through, is I'm not saying it sounds like the Human League, but it
Uh-huh.
gives you that feeling where how the Human League was just coming right through it, you know?
That kind of
And I,
punchy quality
hmm
that they had for a few years, where they were really like optimistic, and there was a lot of momentum to all their songs, almost in a sense.
hmm
I totally
yeah.
know what you mean. Totally know what you mean. That was the vibe I was getting here, for sure.
Now, Drew, when I saw this on the list, I was a little shocked, to be
Yes, I
honest.
gotta say, I am shocked that I brought this up, but in my new music listening, I came across Jamie XX and his new single "It's So Good" on Young Records via the Chanel campaign Coco Crush. For the fashion people in the audience. Now, I gotta say, we very rarely cover anything fashion related on this podcast. That kind of goes against a lot of the aesthetic that we have here. But when I heard this track, I was actually kind of intrigued, because immediately as the house style beat comes in, something else is going on with this track, and then it just kind of hits me like a freight train. There's this krautrock, ashra temple-esque kind of guitar thing going on with this track, and it's very different in some ways than the average house, up-tempo house thing. Again, probably the most interesting thing I've heard Mr. XX do in a little while. uh, but that being said, for a fashion campaign too, no less, totally fascinating. Very bizarre, but kind of cool in its own way, you know?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these fashion campaigns they'll make these left field turns and do something interesting. It's not unheard of, but I do get what you mean here.
Yeah, and
Um,
and in my mind, it's not that I have any problem with like music that Jamie XX has made in the last few years that I've heard. I just feel like it's all pretty much sounded exactly the same.
yeah,
It's kind of turned into this blob in a sense. But then I heard this song and I was like, what is this? Like, it actually caught my ear. So something about the kind of mashup of it being this kind of like house foundation with like a really interesting guitar style over it, and just kind of a real interesting little flow to it. Something different from him, in a time where I felt like there were several years where I heard songs that had his name attached, and I thought, wow, that really sounds like a Target commercial or whatever, you know?
yeah,
Good,
definitely.
good on him for that. Speaking of bands that at a time I would have levied a function of Target commerciality to them, what's your next pick, David?
Yeah. Also, when I put this on the list, even you were like, "Wait, really?" And I have Real Estate's new song, "Haunted World," coming off of their upcoming album. This is Domino Records.
With a familiar song, got nowhere else to be. No turn you make is wrong. There is no rest, there is no sleep. The day.
This will be coming out in February as well, like Omni. But Real Estate is a band. I remember when that first album came out and I saw them live, and I was very taken by them actually way back then. And then as they got more popular during when I would say Days and is that Atlas? I believe that's what it's called, the really big album that they had. Yeah. That that's when I kind of fell off of the indie rock wagon,
Uh-huh.
Around 2014, I was very
Right.
much kind of like, yeah, I've lost the steam here,
Uh-huh.
not really feeling what's going on in the world anymore. And I have come back to them recently. And, I listened to their album that came out in 2020, The Main Thing, which they actually took from the Roxy Music song. Not that the album sounds like Roxy Music, but they were listening to Avalon a lot. But regardless, they are kind of falling into this. I mean, it's jangly and whatnot, but there's kind of this jammy aspect to what they do. A lot of these crop of bands that are kind of essentially influenced by the Grateful Dead, I would say. So you get that kind of style of playing on the guitars and whatnot. And I just think the melody is really good on this song, and I am excited to hear it, to be honest. I kind of just have come back around and I've been listening to them more, and it's kind of just this appreciation for a band that's continually done what they do, you know? As a lot of people kind of compare them like, oh, they're the perfect band to put 3 p.m. at a festival slot or something when there's kind of a hazy glow in the afternoon.
Right, right.
And that's kind of what it is. And I think that a lot of people might think back like, oh, like, yeah, I mean, Atlas was a huge album for them, and you know, was probably played in countless coffee shops or whatnot at its time. But honestly, it's more that I'm kind of enjoying this later era and seeing them just kind of evolve and just be comfortable in their own skin and accept it, what they do. And you know, you got to remember that first album came out on Woodist Records, and it's ultimately, it sounds like a Woodist type band, and I love that kind of music. So I think I think I'm just kind of accepting it all right now. You know what I mean? And I really enjoy it.
Well, and bands like that do tend to go through like eras. I always felt like if you remember the band The Mantles, that they had some records
Yeah.
on Slumberland. Their early record is very, very like specifically of that time and place, the first one. But then if you listen to the last one, it's a little jammier. It's a little more like you can tell the band's been a band a longer time, so they just have a different kind of rapport with each other. It's, you know, bands go through different eras. They kind of evolve and ebb and flow a little bit. So it's interesting to see where people go for sure.
Also, it's cool. I like seeing bands continue on past the hype. You know, it's, you know, we're talking in the wake of this Pitchfork downfall,
Right.
and like, you know, there's not really indie rock is not a thing that's hyped anymore. And you know, Real Estate was one of those bands that was, but they have continued out of that era, so to
Right.
speak. And it's just, you know, it's kind of just like professionals doing their thing, working on their craft, and you know.
Yep. Journeyman growing over time and over records for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I think that is somewhat a good segue to what we're about to talk about, which is our favorite albums of 2023. And there is a little bit of some of that theme permeating through these, I would say.
Oh, for sure.
So, Drew, do you want to start off, and
I
or do you
will.
have
I'll-
additional thoughts, I guess, that you want to add to this?
Yeah, I will say 2023, just as we go into it as a year of records, to me really was a year where if you were interested in a subgenre of music and you were relatively cued into it, you could find lots of interesting stuff going on. There was a really big explosion, I feel like, last year of kind of subgenres and microgenres and stuff like that. Now, that all being said, my jumping off point is actually something that we didn't even talk about at all in any of our episodes last year. It was a little bit of a slow grow for me in a lot of ways, but it is very much a me kind of record. I'll put it that way. The first one I'm going to talk about is an EP. It's by a band called PC World. It's called Infinite Dream Weapon, and it was on DKA Records. I will say, as a fan of things that I consider to be kind of Cabaret Voltaire-esque, this appealed to me massively. I am a big Cabaret Voltaire nut, and this record is essentially like Cabaret Voltaire meets like Detroit Acid kind of sounds, because there's some Detroit Acid kind of parts to it, like really acid housey kind of parts that kind of flare up every now and then. But it's a really, really cool EP. There's some really neat remixes too, that you can listen to of the songs as well, floating around. But again, the record itself, the EP itself, just really interesting and really punchy, and it uses what I think of as being one of the best things about Cabaret Voltaire's dance music, which is that they still had a lot of atmosphere to that. And it's the thing that I don't know if a lot of other EBM adjacent artists remember, because sometimes EBM artists now really want to just bang you over the head, like take a big sledgehammer and just go to town on you. But I like a good vibe, and I'm telling you, PC World, Infinite Dream Weapon, great vibes for sure.
Nice.
What's going to be your jumping off point here, David? I believe we did talk about this record that you're going to bring up.
Yeah, and I really debated whether or not I wanted to put this on here, only just because of its medium,
Uh-huh.
and that is
Uh-huh.
Secret Stratosphere by William Tyler and the Impossible Truth. So this is his live album, but the thing is, the way he presents it is such a new way of hearing him, I will say. So there's plenty of his atmosphere and kind of dreaminess and how he approaches this kind of cosmic instrumental country rock, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, he's really kind of upped the distortion on it and basically just making it more rocking. I mean, like essentially introduces one song as this is our Hawkwind Charlie Daniels song, kind of going in that attitude. And they actually cover Radioactivity by Kraftwerk too,
Hell
which is pretty
yeah.
cool. So, but again, I couldn't. I listened to this album so much, and I mean, I just love William Tyler, and it was such a fresh look at him for a
Uh-huh.
guy who already makes fresh music, in my opinion. And yeah, this was Merge Records as well. So I wanted to make
To
sure that got on the list.
to maybe translate a little bit of how I felt about this record into old record store speak, I feel like this is the moment where William Tyler had his version of how. So Hawkwind had several albums that came out, and then they had their infamous live album that came out. And the infamous
Hmm.
live album had a really, really cool version of Master of the Universe and like several of their most known and famous songs. And for a lot of people, that live album is their most famous or is their best record. Like for a lot of people, that's the version of Hawkwind they want to remember. And I feel like this is what William Tyler is offering with this record. Is he's
Right.
offering his version of that. It's because the songs are more jammy, they're more fun. I hear you, dude. This was definitely a kind of a weird. I think it should be on your list because it was a reclaiming of some of that material into a different context for sure.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you could listen to those other records and like them well enough, but then you could like this new record in a completely different way. And I think for all the like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard type dudes that are sitting around out there, smoking a bong and listening to psych rock records all afternoon, this William Tyler is the one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
For sure. For sure.
What's your next one?
My next one's going to be another EP, and it's actually by the Swiss band Plague Pits. It's going to be the EP The Light. And I believe they actually put this out themselves, although there is a tape pressing on a label. But that being said, I have been a big fan of these fellows for the last couple of years. I will say EP format really does seem to do really well for them. They've done a lot of different stuff. They've made several tapes and a lot of records right in a row. But The Light is just a really compact, really distilled down version of what they do in a very short, wonderful amount of time. As a person, if someone were to say, "Hey, what would you describe them as?" Essentially, to me, what they sound like is if you tried to make Pet Shop Boys an evil band now, that's what they sound like.
Nice.
They very much sound like the Pet Shop Boys to me, but in a very specific modern kind of way. And I think they're really good and they're very catchy. And it's been really cool to see them evolve over the last couple of years because they just have been doing a rapid fire slew of releases. I mean, they put out an LP and 2 EPs last year, so they've been humming, David.
Nice.
I don't think your next thing is European. Are we going to bring it back across the pond? Are we going back across the pond?
No, I like that. I like that.
I had to do it. I had to go geographic on that one.
No. So this is the album "Nothing for Me, Please" by Dean Johnson of his own label, Mama Bird Recording Company. Seattle-based musician. I think he's been a local presence there for a long time with his band, the Sons of. But he released his first solo record, and this album is a swift. Uh, I think it's under 30 minutes, and essentially is a very soft but kind of intimate collection of country and truly Western songs. The song that came off of that basically got me into this album was the song Faraway Skies, which actually I heard on the show Reservation Dogs for you TV fans, I guess. But essentially, it kind of gave me the same feel of when I first heard Drew. Do you know? Do you know the song "My Rifle, My Pony and Me"? The Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson tune
Oh yeah, yeah,
from
yeah, totally.
Rio Bravo.
Yeah.
It gave me that kind of vibe, I guess, but it's kind of in that vein of just kind of cowboy, old timey songs. But it's not. It doesn't sound like it's trying to be of that past. It sounds again modern and not hokey. But it just I really really love just the execution here. I mean, the other song is about becoming an actor, which is obviously, I mean, makes you think of Act Naturally by Buck Owens or something. But essentially, it's just really, really well executed singer-songwriter country western music. And I really do mean like classic country western in that regard. But yeah, from your region of the universe, Drew.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Just a hop and a jump north of me, for sure.
So where does that take you?
I will now be bringing us back to the States, to at least as I know it to be, because I believe Bo Wanzer is based in Chicago, Chi-Town, back to the chilly Midwest. But I'm going to be talking about Debons and Pierre's Card Short of a Full Deck on Dark Entries Records. An awesome avant-garde techno, like mutant techno record, essentially, from this year. Really, really cool stuff. Really interesting programming. I will say, if you're a fan of things as strange as Throbbing Gristle, but you still like a little dance thump, a little dance quality to it, this band is definitely still dancey in parts, but just very strange, and with plenty of really interesting, effects and things to keep it really interesting. But Dark Entries had a really cool year in general. I just feel like this record really stood out to me, even amongst the other things Dark Entries did, simply for the idea that it was just so cool. It was just so different. Now that being said, I wanted to say this as a little bit of an aside at this point in the list. Dark Entries also put out a reissue of the Nervous Gender LP this year. So they had a really busy year this year in terms of really, really cool industrial stuff. I got to tip my hat to both of to both the records in general, but I'll tell you, A Card Short of a Full Deck is a really cool techno record, and I had to put it on my list for sure.
And if you're in the Bay Area, go stop by the brick and mortar store that Josh of Dark Entries runs too. I'm sure he would appreciate your business and whatnot.
I'm sure you could
great
find a record you would want.
Great
Yes.
curation that he does.
Yeah, totally. Totally. What is next on your list, David?
Yeah, so my next one is a band that has been working at it for a while now. And I think this is their fourth album.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so this is L'Oreal meets the Obsolete and their Datura on Sonic Cathedral. L'Oreal the Obsolete, Mexican psych rock post-punk band. And this album is their most, I would definitely say, post-punk leaning at what they've done at this point. And just really, really cool music. I mean, I don't know, it gets into some kind of crowdy grooves at some part, but also the way she delivers her vocals, it can be pretty spooky too at times.
Yeah.
But either way, this is a band I've been into for a while now, and I think, literally have made their best record yet.
Oh, man.
So,
Here's the thing. I like those other ones. I think the other ones are good, but man, this one, I really like this one. This one is so good to me. I totally am in agreement with you on this one. This was in my top 10, so I'm glad you were talking about this one, because it's like, knowing that bands this cool are down in Mexico City, it's just such a cool thought. You know what I mean? Like, and their combination of sounds is so cool. It's just such a cool record. Very different.
Especially for what they've been doing. Yeah, I think it was an interesting step for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So where are we stepping to, Drew?
I'm going to bring us back to LA Town. We're going to go back up north, up into LA Town, and we're going to talk about Agriculture, their self-titled record on the Flenser. We talked about Agriculture in one of the episodes last year really briefly, but they're a kind of transcendental black metal project, kind of nouveau black metal, as you might say. But that being said, the record is utterly flawless. I would say they're irreproachable in terms of being at the top of their game right now when it comes to new style black metal. There were other good black metal records that I heard this year that I really enjoyed, and I will say it was not like a bad year for that as a subgenre, but for me, this record was as good as some of the, greats of the genre have ever been. I mean, it's just very tastefully produced, and there's parts that are just really furious, and then other parts where just things just kind of melt down into this really amazing atmospheric kind of tranquility. And they're a band that just feels like they're bringing some kind of elemental quality to what they do, and I think that's very important when you're doing metal. Metal is a very elemental genre. It needs to feel physical. You know what I mean, David?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. No, I totally feel you on that.
And of all the things we've talked about, certainly that record has gotten some of the best reviews of any of the record we've talked about so far. So I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know about that record for sure. Like that one's like one of those ones where I saw it on like, 5 best metal albums of the year, 5 best albums of the year kind of
Right.
stuff. So, I mean, they're definitely being talked about, and I would imagine their next record is going to be a make or break kind of moment, because it's going to be a moment of people saying, what's next for this? Because this was very, very like they have arrived with this record for sure in a big way. Where does that leave us going back to on your next pick, David?
So we are going to your neck of the woods, Portland, for my next new picks, actually.
Yeah,
Jeffrey
we got a lot of West Coast
Silverstein.
stuff going on.
I know, right?
On our lists.
Jeffrey Silverstein, Western Sky Music, Arrowhawk Records. This is Jeffrey Silverstein's been around here for a bit, making you're gonna see some Cosmic Country on my list, but he put this album out, and he even actually has William Tyler on one of the songs on it too. But the thing about Jeffrey Silverstein is his vocal range dips into kind of this like Bill Callahan or David Berman-esque stylings, but he really ups the ante on the dreamy, I would say, compared to some others. And this one actually has it was noticeable how punchy the rhythm section actually is on this one. It really pops through it. But, there's been I guess just a further trajectory of his stylings here. And I just kind of always had this playing in some regard, and it's very evocative. It might be my favorite of his as well, as someone who's enjoyed all this stuff, but it's really fantastic. But yeah, Jeffrey Silverstein, Western Sky Music.
A very cool record for sure. For some reason, when I listened to it, it had this weird breeding aspect to me of it, and I don't necessarily fully mean it in terms of the way the songs are written, but how Leonard Cohen on New Skin for Old Ceremony had drums again on the record, and he had
I can see what you're getting at
more
there.
momentum on all of his songs. For some reason, this record kind of had that vibe to me of a guy that was putting actual deliberate momentum into all of his tracks after maybe like doing other
'cause
material, you know?
Yeah, and he's used a lot of drum machines in the past, and
Okay.
now I know he had a full band working with him on this
Okay.
one. From some notable, if you look up the players on this, they play in some pretty recognizable indie groups. So
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, I gotta take us away from this Pacific Northwest's blissathon for a minute here and take us into the cold, harsh, Midwestern quality of Chicago. Um, my next pick is gonna be Facts, Still Life and Decay. And this will be the first time I'm mentioning Trouble in Mind today, but it won't be the last. But I'll get into that later. Now, that being said, obviously, David, you and I have talked about Facts several times on the podcast. This is not the first time. I have well established myself as a fan of them. I do really like this one because this one is really jammy Facts record. This was kind of like them a little bit more sprawling in a way, but I really just feel like, it's Facts firing on all cylinders. They did pare down a little bit for this record. The lineup is a little bit different, but again, just as good as, in my opinion, any of their other records they've made, and they've made really good records in the last couple of years. So another classic from Trouble in Mind. So thank you, Trouble in Mind, for doing that. We appreciate you for putting out cool rock bands. Or at least, I certainly do, and several people I know do, so I can speak for them and say that part of it at least. But I would say, just to stir the pot a little bit, now that I've had a chance to I own all of the Fax records, this actually is the one I listen to the most.
Really?
Yeah. I just
Interesting.
like the almost kind of krautrock repetition kind of quality to some of it. There's almost a little bit of a This Heat kind of quality to a little bit of it too. But I like them all. I will say, and I do think all of them do have their charms, but just something about this one specifically for me just really reads in a really interesting kind of, a little bit kind of like This Heat's Deceit, but a little bit jammier almost in a way. Almost a little more of a punk kind of quality to it too,
You'd
obviously.
be hard pressed to find a band that records their drums better, in my opinion.
Ooh, for real. They have sounded really wonderful on these last couple records for sure on that front. Okay, David, after that little bit of harsh Chicago winter, we can now go back. But I had to break the love fest for a minute.
Yeah. All right, back to Portland.
Yeah.
To the Rose City, the Rose City Band, Garden Party, Thrill Jockey. I think I talked about them last year. I don't know. This is just a band that I'm always going to talk about. It's just that simple. You know what you're getting, and they just kind of edge it a little further every time.
Mm-hmm.
Great chugling cosmic music, you know?
For a little jugal.
Yep. And I absolutely love this band so much. And yeah, if you don't know them by this point, after we've talked about them, then, go listen to them and just, especially in the warmer months, go on a long drive and put them on and
Right.
just let it ride.
Does this one read a little bit like Backyard Barbecue record to you?
Oh yeah.
That was
absolutely.
the vibe I got when I listened to it finally.
Oh yeah. Pop open a beer and
Yeah.
get the grill going. Easy.
Get those veggie burgers on the grill.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure any herbal additions too. So
Yeah, well, it's Portland. I mean, it's going to be an outdoor party. Come on now.
Exactly.
Come on.
So where's your party going?
Oh man, I'm gonna again have to bring down the vibe a little bit again and bring it to something a little bit harsher. My next pick is actually from merry old London, England. Autobahn's Ecstasy of Ruin, which is on.
It's a party, but it's a party of ruin.
Oh man, it's a party of ruin, all right. On Tough Love. Now I will say, David, this record, I really like the direction the band went on this record. I hadn't heard of them until this record, but I went back and checked out a couple of their older pieces of material. Liked it well enough, but this record is really cool. The lineup for the band itself is a little bit different on this record. I believe they lost a member in the interim time.
Yeah, they did.
So it is going to be obviously the writing changes when somebody leaves kind of thing. I mean, that's just kind of the way of the world, certainly, when it comes to music. But that being said, David, this record is just super cool. It honestly, even though I wouldn't say, and I don't throw this around lightly, there's a couple of parts where I just feel like it just goes full on like Joy Division, super dark, but not in the corny way that a lot of modern bands that want to sound like Joy Division sounds. I think this band definitely kind of has a more industrial clangor to them, but
Yeah.
I just mean the vibe that they're able to achieve very much almost goes like the second Joy Division album, like closer, like really dark kind of vibes that a lot of bands wish they could aspire to, but they just don't.
Yeah.
They don't get there
I
at all.
I think they used to do more like acoustic drums, and now this one's pretty heavy on the drum machines, which is cool.
Yeah. I think this one definitely does have that really mechanical darkness
Hmm.
to it.
Also, Tough Love is London. These boys are from Leeds, so
Okay.
you want to make that
They're going to
distinction.
have a little industrial quality to them if they're from Leeds then.
Yep.
You know, just they're going to be industrial lads. Now that being said, I know I had to get a little dark on us, David. Do you have anything that can kind of bring us out of the murk a little bit?
Well, see, here's the thing. Like Rose City Band, you can play this at your barbecue, but the thing is, his lyricism is actually always very intense, and I'm talking about this is probably the biggest name on my list
Uh
today.
huh.
And this is Jason Isbell's album Weather Vanes on his record label Southeastern. Isbell is kind of riding at the top of his game, in my opinion, right now,
Uh
just in
huh.
terms of being a songwriter and lyricist. I actually got to see him live last summer, and this is one of the best shows I've seen in quite some time. And this album he produced this one actually, compared to him using Dave Cobb in the past, but just great Americana, loud guitars. Again, he's kind of one of these figures. It's like if you don't know what he sounds like by this point, you've been kind of under a rock. He's a pretty established artist at this point, I would put it. But this one is, I think he really, really executed a nice album here, and yeah, his lyrics are always just they kind of cut through you a little bit. There's just he's not afraid of bearing it all out there and letting you see every kind of nook and cranny of what he's kind of working through and all that. He's vulnerability is not an issue, and he's got the 400 unit that he has as his backing band is one of the best live bands he's got going. I think
Mm-hmm.
Sadler Vaden is an amazing guitarist, and yeah, I'm going to see him again in March here at the Tabernacle.
Oh,
So
awesome. Okay. Nice. Well, my next pick actually, I will say you could talk about in terms of actual songwriter, like lyrical concepts as well, but I wouldn't normally talk about somebody on Ninja Tune in that way. Now, that being said, my next pick is going to be Nabiha Iqbal's This World Couldn't See Us, which actually features several tracks with really interesting kind of confessional style lyrics, David. Really personal lyrics, but then a couple of really interesting other tracks that I would say go more in the direction of like your kind of classic uh, house kind of content, like relationship kind of stuff that's more like a modern house type lyric. But that being said, this record's really interesting to me because it kind of straddles a few fences. And again, I'm probably not as up on the various stuff on Ninja Tune because they do put out so many different things. So for me, this was a little just something like my friend Chris recommended this record, and I was like, I'm just gonna check it out. And I listened to it, and I was like, this is so cool because it's like a mix of like synth pop, like confessional synth pop kind of moments, with like really interesting. There's almost kind of a jangle pop psych kind of part to some of the songs. She does a lot of really interesting things, and I will say, I know she's a DJ. She's got pretty eclectic tastes, so I assume that's probably why the record's pretty interesting. But that being said, again, as someone that honestly I haven't listened to much on Ninja Tune in the last few years, and this really kind of grabbed me. I will say, David.
yeah, I actually came to her on her record Weighing of the Heart, which was in 2017.
Okay.
That was on Ninja Tune as well. And I was when that album came out, that was when I was I was basically picking up on everything that was going on certain electronic labels. Obviously Ninja Tune being one of the most storied. And when I found out that that album came out, I was very interested because it was kind of it was almost like Cure sounding, I guess, at times. And and she's obviously kind of continued in this kind of new wavy path. And I like you said, I think she had an NTS show where she would DJ regularly. So like you said, she kind of pulls in a bunch of very different ideas. And I really enjoyed this one.
This was a really real, though she was relatively new to me at the time. I've now since listened to all of her stuff, and I gotta say, I just think a really interesting eclectic approach to doing like a mix of maybe something approaching synth pop with these other kind of sounds, but real good record, really good record. I think she's based out of London.
She is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Well, where are we going back across the pond, David?
I believe
Very
Brooklyn.
nice.
So Anthony Naples and his album Orbs.
Mm-hmm.
This is he put this one out on his own, and I think we talked about this record when it came out, and I'm just looking at my list here. In terms of pure electronic music, this is easily my favorite of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a fan of kind of chill out dubby music, a la, even Moon Safari, the KD Sessions by Kruder Dorfmeister, maybe some Doriti Column in his 90s era, that this is kind of where that lies. So like really dreamy dubby stuff with some good melodies in the mix. I can't recommend this album enough. Naples, he started off making more kind of lo-fi house music and techno, and now he's kind of moved into this dreamier era, and I'm here for it. I think it's awesome. So that would that is easily my favorite electronic record of the year.
Oh, it's so dreamy. It's just super dreamed out. I will say, to take a complete hard left turn, my next one is as up tempo and wild and crazy as that was totally chill. Which is to say, my next pick is going to be Feudal, their album Unit 1, which was on DKA Records. Feudal are an LA duo. And I will say, just really intense, greatly well-produced, hard-hitting, kind of up-tempo techno sounds. Certainly a little bit of industrial lean to several of the tracks, but certainly techno is the engine that powers the beast, so to speak. That being said, this record, the single was great. The flow of the album is really wonderful. It's just a really nice, hard-hitting, kind of unrelenting record, and I really, really enjoyed it. It felt like something that would come from LA in my mind, very much so.
Nice.
David, I don't think your next thing is going to be quite so crazy, though. I think you're going to maybe calm us down a little bit again here.
Yeah, so...
Though there is a couple dance songs on this record.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I have to give it up for the band that I put out last year, and that is Certain Times and their album Desire off of Double Phantom Records. I think it's some of the most wonderful synth pop songwriting that I've heard in a while. I think that Nathaniel and Caitlin Higgins are so good together. I think they crafted something really lovely and catchy, and it's something where I am always turning to one new song after another and thinking, oh, well, that's maybe my favorite, or that's my favorite. And I really, really can't speak highly enough of this album, in my opinion. I think they've really crafted a nice, updated version of this kind of music. And yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've certainly had my say about when we talked about the singles and everything, and I've certainly gone on record as saying my little piece about it. But, as a person that listens to plenty of new wave and synth pop music, it's great to see my friends doing synth pop music, and you know, I was glad to hear each new single as it came out. Surely, surely. Um,
So we're going to some heavier music again, right?
I
Am I looking at
believe
this
so,
right?
yes, David. My next pick, I gotta say, the last few years, metal for me has gone a little hit or miss. There's some metal I just really, really love, and then there's other metal that just doesn't stick with me in the same way that I assumed it would. But this record by the band Crawl, which is called 10,000 Pole Hammers on Profound Lore Records, just amazing. I mean, it's a shockingly heavy, super well produced, super tasteful record. For anybody that's into the heavier spectrum that likes, whether you like sludge or doom, there's something certainly there for you. If you found yourself saying, I like, heavier music, but a lot of the time the vibe just isn't they just don't sell the vibe for me. I will say Crawl, the vibe is as desolate and harsh as I've heard in quite some time. They really do up the ante on this record. So that being said, I know I've been pretty hyperbolous here, but I just gotta say, I don't have any other metal records on my list. There's a reason this metal record, uh, what I mean is from here on out, I don't have any other metal records on my list. And what I'm saying is, I really can't speak highly enough of this record. Crawl has another release, but this release is crystallize everything that they do up into one thing, and it is, like I said, just unrelenting punishment in the best way possible, for sure. That being said, David, I don't think you've got any other metal records on your list.
I'm done with nothing of that frame. Yeah,
But your next record rocks pretty hard, I will say.
this one does, and this is Interiors by the Vacant Lots, Fuzz Club,
Hmm.
and I can say this without a doubt. This is my favorite record by them yet. Like, and I love so much of their music. This one was just, oh, I mean, this was one of my most listened to records of last year, easily.
Hmm.
And it's easy too because 8 songs, I guess under 30 minutes, and there are just some real bangers on this album, in my opinion. And I love In Game, I love Damaged Goods. I cannot get enough of them. And I think that Jared's guitar work sounds really good. It's punchy. It can just it can get lost into the psych kind of repetition at times, especially on the last song. And yeah, I don't know. This album is just awesome. And again, it's just that kind of further development of their sound that they've been doing, and they just execute it well.
I think I was worried. I have at a time been worried that the Vacant Lots are just almost in a way too consistent. It's like the Ramones. You're literally kind of getting the same core elements every time, but just like they just. But weirdly enough, I feel like they're just getting better and better at it though. Like it's not the archetype that I'm saying this in a way that makes it sound negative, and I'm really not meaning it to sound negative at all, which is to say that I feel like they're getting better at this mold that they built for themselves. It's like they built this car, and the car just keeps getting better every time you see the car drive by your house. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But that being said, I thought this record was great. I really did. And there's several songs on here, Scars, Amnesia. I mean, I put those on a million mixes this year, so
Hmm.
just gotta say this will go down as being one of my all-time favorite ones by them. But that being said, just as good as in a lot of ways as their other ones. You know what I mean? Like they're just very consistent. It's fascinating. I will say my next pick. This band is not about consistency in any way, shape, or form. That's not their stock and trade. But as someone that's been a fan of them for a long time, I did have to mention Wolf Eyes, their new album, Dreams and Splattered Lines, which I had thought they had just made themselves, but I had seen somewhere that the release was listed as being under the Disciples label. Now, that being said, the new Wolf Eyes, Dreams and Splattered Lines, is really them at a really impressionistic point in their career. They aren't trying to be as heavy here. They're trying to be a little more. You're getting a lot of spooky Wolf Eyes. This isn't the trip metal like pounding you in the face. This is definitely the like being in the haunted house kind of Wolf Eyes, and this is my favorite Wolf Eyes, of course. This record specifically really does sound like if Suicide were reimagined as a noise band. You know, I really do think they really embrace that part of their sound very much on this record. So this, to me, really plays up with everything I like about Wolf Eyes as a band, for sure.
Do you know which album number this is for them?
I couldn't even tell you. I could not
Yeah.
even tell you the proper actual album number. I will say, I mean, we're obviously several albums beyond their time, even at Sub Pop. I mean, we're several albums beyond the chain of albums they made after that chain of albums. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's just
I couldn't even
wild.
tell you, man. I really couldn't
Yeah.
even tell you.
Yeah,
Now,
I
that
mean,
being
it's-
said, they also did a collection of collaborations last year as well. So they were really busy last year, just in general. And like I said, they may not always try to be really consistent. That's not necessarily what it is Wolf Eyes is all about. They're cosmic explorers who are cosmically exploring their niche, their auteur niche sound that they've created. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that being said, this would actually be a reasonable place to jump in if you're someone that's always been curious. This record is actually pretty interesting. If you're a fan of things like Throbbing Gristle, but you just have never really made the jump into something more modern, this is certainly something more modern you could like. It's cool, it's weird. It's certainly got some of the best vocals of Wolf Eye's career, so you'd be jumping in at a really good point. David, what is your next pick on our end of the year listomania?
Speaking of jumping in to a band with a career,
Mm-hmm.
the latest album by Woods, Perennial, on Woodist Records. This caught me by surprise. I don't even know what really kind of pushed me to check it out. But when I did, I just was like, this is so good. Like, this is so well produced, so just nicely crafted as this kind of, and they go into instrumentals. They build out these dreamy elements, and sometimes it almost feels like not Tropicalia. I'm sorry, Exotica music at times. And I think the drums sound really good. They got this kind of dust and dirt on them that come through very well. This might have been my most listened to record last year, actually, because I just it was just something I was like putting on constantly because it was just something to get lost in a little bit. And yeah, I just loved it. I just really love this album. And you know, this band has been doing it for over a decade. You know, just kind of working away at things, and I think they really nailed it on this one in a really special new way.
Yeah.
So it's just really, it's really cool to see bands do that, in my opinion.
Oh, I totally hear you, man. I think when you sent this to me, that was another one of those moments of like, oh, them? Really? Like, I hadn't thought about them in a couple of years, I'll confess. And it wasn't necessarily that I had some big axe to grind with them. I just probably wasn't listening to anything quite like that. But I gave this a spin, and it honestly gave me a little bit of like that kind of rush that I got the first time I heard Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. That kind of psychedelic, I wouldn't fully say country, but like psychedelic rock, but modern.
Yeah, just with somewhat folky,
right.
you know, Americana elements, but it's not ever like on the nose. You
Yeah.
know, It's just you. It's kind of uncanny. You know where it's pulling from, but it's not overt at
And I guess in
times.
that context, maybe that makes it modern psychedelia, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily folk, but it would be modern psychedelia because psychedelia would have folk in it.
Sure.
But that being
If we're
said,
splitting hairs.
yeah, I know, right? Totally random. That being said, my next thing is definitely not even in any way organic, David. I'm going to take us back to the Midwest with my next pick with The Serfs Half Eaten by Dogs, also on Trouble in Mind. I got to say, love this record. I knew I would love it coming in. There's part of me that kind of weirdly knows that my hangover of how much I loved Crime of Passing is kind of powering me into loving this record as well because it's obviously the same people and it's got a
Yeah.
lot of the same things going on just with completely different ratios. That's what's so interesting about it. But that being said, it's a really good record. I do like other Surfs records, so it's not like I didn't know I wouldn't like this one anyway. But that being said, this is just another real solid addition to their catalog. A really nice kind of a little more industrial leaning than some of their other stuff. But that being said, a real good use of their style and their sound.
I
I feel like.
it's also cool to they've obviously been on Feel It
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. I believe this is their first on Trouble in Mind, and this is a band that just this whole crew, they're workhorses, man.
Yes.
I will say they really they're putting it in, and I will say that I think it's the opening track for this album is one of my favorites, openers of the year, on the Surfs album. I don't know, I really enjoyed it.
It's a real well crafted record for sure. And when I heard the single, I was like, dang, I know I'm gonna like this kind of thing. Like the single really just kind of lets you know what you're gonna get, kind of thing. So that being said, yeah, another Trouble in Mind moment there for me for the year, where I gotta say, definite tip of my hat to that label this year for sure.
We're not done yet.
No, I know. There's more yet to talk about.
This concludes the first half of our favorite albums of 2023. Stay tuned to next week where we will drop part 2 with our top 5 albums, and then we will also talk about some hopes and predictions for 2024, and also an interview with Gavin Brivik, who scored the film How to Blow Up a Pipeline.